Our international man of mystery, Dan Murphy, is back with us with more on the story.
Hi guys.
Dan, lovely to see you.
How's it going? Great to see you as well. So I come from the Middle East with learnings from Saudi Arabia, learnings from around the region, and in particular this super hot IPO regarding Saudi Aramco. And this is interesting because every single aspect of this IPO has been hotly debated right around the region. And now we're getting more insights from Summer Syed at the Wall Street Journal, who is deeply sourced within the kingdom. The journal reporting that Tokyo is now a preferred play for this major listing, as opposed to London or New York City. Now, this is quite a significant development here because clearly, as I mentioned, this has been debated pretty hotly, but at the same time, we're learning that Saudi Aramco is likely to offer a split here, perhaps a portion of its shares on the domestic exchange, the Saudi Tadawul. That was always going to be in play, possibly as soon as later on this year, and then an international offering to come in 2020 or 2021. Essentially, lawmakers within the kingdom have told the Wall Street Journal that perhaps political uncertainty in the UK and in China now make Tokyo a preferred play. Of course, that's going to be up for debate as well. Tokyo clearly not as much of a liquid market relative to London or New York City, and at the same time, mostly untested for an IPO of this size. According to one plan under consideration, the Wall Street Journal says that the company could raise as much as $50 billion in Saudi Arabia. Both domestic and international investors would be able to have a slice of that domestic offering. And of course, when you look at some of the commentary that we've heard from Saudi Aramco in the past, it really does seem like the allure of New York as an international listing was certainly in play for the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman. That was one of his preferred options, certainly to deepen ties with the Trump administration and the United States. However, it's also said that because of Saudi Arabia's relationship and de facto control of OPEC and also the terrorism financing laws and cartel laws in the United States perhaps make that a less preferred option now. At the same time, it was also cited that perhaps because of the political uncertainty in the UK, the decision by Boris Johnson to shut down the government essentially, and also uncertainty around Brexit really make that a harder play as well for Saudi Aramco. So still no real details on the valuation and exactly how much could be raised, but this is certainly back in play now after being put on ice for some time.
It was interesting. I saw someone else suggest that perhaps as a result of Brexit, the London listing rules may be closer to what they have in New York as well, and that would raise concerns again for this listing. But Dan, wherever it eventually takes place in terms of the location of the bourse, I mean, one thing Sri and I have been talking about is just oil price volatility too. And I mean, at the moment, relatively weak. The question we have is, can the oil price outlook maintain stable enough for this IPO to really get off the ground?
And that's a really big question. And Saudi Aramco has long said in a lot of its public disclosure statements that the timing of any IPO is really going to depend on market conditions. Now, granted, of course, Saudi Arabia has a huge say in the price of oil because as de facto leader of OPEC, they're able to effectively increase or reduce output in order to manipulate prices. But when you look at the price action that we see right now, clearly oil prices remain volatile. We came out of that big slump in the fourth quarter of last year. And really, even though we've seen big efforts by policymakers in attempt to prop up prices, oil has stayed mostly muted throughout the course of 2019 and now still hovering at around 50 to 60 US dollars a barrel. So I think the big question now is, what are we going to hear from policymakers coming into the JMMC meeting in Abu Dhabi at the end of the year? Are we going to see some kind of jaw-burning effort to prop up prices, perhaps commentary on the IPO and how prices are affecting that decision-making? And also this move to extend production out to the production cut out to the first quarter of 2020. Is that in doubt now, and will we need to see cuts being deepened in order to prop up prices? I think it's a big question for the market.
I think they have to, right? That's the reality. I mean, the Saudis really need $80 a barrel plus, not only to support a decent valuation, but also to balance the budget as well. Just going off tangent somewhat, let's not count out our own home base, Singapore, as a listing venue for Aramco. And what's really interesting is that Boonchai here at the SGX attended the Saudi Investment Summit last year. Yes, it was controversial, coming at a time post the Khashoggi killing, when a lot of executives were shunning Saudi Arabia. But what's really interesting with Singapore and the SGX is that they have been very quietly and diligently building relationships and building on the relationship a very good trading relationship that they have with the Saudis. So let's not count out Singapore, but I think moving forward, there is a risk, and you and I have talked about this, Dan, that the Saudis may abandon the IPO altogether, precisely because of the reasons that you mentioned. We are witnessing the oil price getting crushed because of the trade war narrative, because of the global economic uncertainty. And one has to wonder whether they will approach it through a different route and retool the IPO altogether. And I think it's no coincidence that over in this part of the world, Aramco has been aggressively getting into downstream partnerships in India, in Malaysia and elsewhere in high demand, high growth Asia. And I wonder if that is the next step, whether they will spin off the downstream refining and petchem business.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, we saw the SABIC acquisition as well. It's been a big part of diversifying the business just to get it ready for IPO. But at the same time, look at Saudi Aramco, right? This is an NOC being asked to essentially play the role of nation builder. And can you consider any other business around the world that has such an important role in driving an economy? Saudi Aramco and the prospects for Saudi Arabia are intrinsically linked. So they probably do need this to go public at some point, but whether or not they're ready to do that really remains to be seen. The international investment community wants this business on a public market because they want a slice of those huge revenues, world's most profitable company. But at the same time, the kingdom needs to play this methodically in order for it to really be a success for them. And that is possibly the hardest part, I think.
It does sound like the Crown Prince still looks at a heftier valuation than some of the potential investors and banks are realistically trying to get as well, Dan. Interesting.
Yeah, Aramco remains the crown jewel of the reform program for Saudi Arabia. They've got to get it right. Dan, excellent, and lovely to see you again, sir.
So
Nice to see you
have
both
back.
as well.
Just like the old times. Right, coming up, more perspective on where the US-China trade fight could lead the markets and the global economy. Coming up next.